Hello, everyone. Welcome. Dave, we're here. It's Wednesday. We're so glad to be together, right?
Yes, where do these weeks go? I can't believe it. We're already back together. It's like it seems like maybe 24 hours since we were here last time.
Yeah, it's great. We've had a crazy time where I've been. I don't know about you, but life just seems to just go up and down some days.
Yeah, nothing like what you've had. You've had some excitement there with forest fires.
Yeah, we had the lightning struck in kind of like they call it like a dry rain. Just lightning came down and hit the side of the mountain close to us, and one of the ladies and we go to church with lost her home. But man, that fire was one of the scariest things I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, it happened when I was younger in that area, and a lot of the area around there burned, but not quite as big as what you guys were going through this time.
Yeah, we had a lot of our neighbors and people across the way from us evacuating. And it's amazing to see when I drive around the neighborhoods now how close the fire literally came to to their back doorstep. And it was pretty terrifying. It was kind of a wild weekend, but and I pulled everything out of the office, was boxing things up just because it's only 2 minutes from my house. And so all that was pretty intense all through the weekend.
Well, I'm glad everything worked out and that you guys were able to get things taken care of. It's great for that the firefighters are there and have the skills to take care of that stuff.
Yeah, so I think it's just a little over 50% contained, which is bad, but still good because it's moving away from town. But it's good for all of us, and so you might see some differences in the lighting and the cameras because I literally was grabbing things and throwing them in boxes and putting them in my car. So we're going to try to get back to the same look here eventually.
I'm sure you'll be successful at some point here in the future.
And I just want to thank those who are joining us live, and thank you so much for being here. And those watching on replay, thank you also. We're very grateful that you're here, that you're spending time with us. And what we do during this show is we come on, we ask Dave all the retirement questions we have. We put a list together, we pull them through webinars, through podcasts, through your emails. And we also encourage you, if you're watching live, to go ahead and submit your question, and that we can get that to Dave. And Dave, we have two topics today. We're going to get to both of those. But the first one we're going to talk about is look before you lerp. And that's if you can kind of explain what that is and where that came from, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is the title of a book that was written by David McKnight, the best-selling author that wrote The Power of Zero, got a new book out, Tax-Free Income for Life. But basically, the book talks about using permanent life insurance, or what is called a life insurance retirement plan. That's a term that he coined to help us better eliminate the risk in retirement, to help us provide some better secure sources of income, and to help us with a long-term care event if we were to have one, to be able to use that policy's death benefit to cover that during our living years. So great concept. We teach a webinar called Look Before You LERP that people can attend. And you've also got a book out there by Dave McKnight that you could purchase that also would provide the detailed information about some of the stuff we'll cover today in these questions.
And so what we did is we took questions from this webinar that you had. So Dave, those will be the questions I'm going to be throwing at you. And again, we encourage you to submit your questions. We have one of our favorites, Chantil's, jumping on to say good morning. And she's coming through Facebook. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, good morning. We haven't seen her for a few weeks, maybe even a few months. So welcome back. Super happy to have you back with us today.
Yeah. So again, if you're watching live, go ahead and submit your retirement questions. If you just have any questions, I mean, we talk about Medicare, Social Security, reverse mortgages, long-term care. Dave, I think you answer pretty much every question under the sun. And I don't know how you store all that, but that's amazing to me.
Yeah, there are a ton of questions people have, and we do our best to get those answered, and happy to do a bunch more today.
And Dave, as we're getting into it, Diana, she's my first one to bring up, and she's asking, what would you give the percentage for each of the three buckets? And before we get in that, maybe explain what these three buckets are for those maybe who are new to this concept.
Absolutely. So there are millions of different options out there for retirement planning, millions of, when you take all the investments, the structures that you could use. But it really comes down to a three-bucket process that if you will put about 6 months of basic living expenses in a taxable bucket, this is something where you would have the money liquid if there were an emergency, and you'd be able to know this is taxable because you get some type of 1099 on this income each year. But 6 months in there, you're tax deferred, depending on if you're married or single. Single individuals shouldn't have more than about $250,000. Married couple, not more than 500. Some of you, depending on structure of other assets or pensions, may have to bring these down to zero. And then your tax-free bucket, the one that we love the best, because no matter what happens to the future of tax rates, you're going to be able to get that money out tax-free. That should have everything else. So if you can structure it correctly, not only do we eliminate tax rate risk, but what we find is when we put the assets together in the places they need to be, we can also eliminate many of the other risks that we talk about here on the show, as well as on our website and through our webinars in regards to the risks that retirees are going to face that they need to start eliminating.
Dave, where do you see the majority of the mistakes that are being made as people are putting their money into these three buckets?
Well, we're trying to treat our retirements like our parents did. We want to put that money in that tax deferred bucket, thinking that we had higher brackets during our working years than we're going to have in retirement. It's just not true. I run calculations all the time for people, and what we're finding is, especially right now where we have historically low tax rates, it's not the case. We start losing deductions during our retirement years. We've got Social Security now that could end up being taxed. So what we're finding is people are paying a lot more in retirement in taxes than they ever thought they would be. And oftentimes it's higher than they were paying during their working years when they had all those deductions they could take.
I think it's great advice. Dave, we also have Gary, our good friend, jumping on saying good morning. He's out of that San Francisco area, and that's definitely a morning over there.
Gary, good to see you this morning. Glad to have you with us again. Always enjoy having you part of the show and webinars and other things that you join that we do.
So let's jump over to Doug. Doug is asking, do you think it makes sense to buy term insurance while you are young and invest the difference in premium cost?
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about this. And one thing that you need to remember with any type of term insurance is only about 1% to 2% of the policies ever get any type of payout on it. So not against term insurance if that's all you can afford, but many times we look at advisors such as Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, that they have promoted for years to buy term and invest the difference. Well, when you look at the future of tax rates and you look at the effect that it has, what we find is many of them are changing their tune. They're realizing that what they've been preaching for decades isn't necessarily good advice when we look at the future that we're facing. Because the problem with term is you're ending up losing the value at some point for most of you, but the money that you're then investing elsewhere that you're putting into the market, you're going to be subject to tax on most of that, depending on where you put it. So you may have tax rates that could be double what they are today. So what we want is to be able to not only take advantage of getting it into a tax-free environment, the way the permanent insurance is structured, but we also have many products, and most of them that we use, where you're going to be able to have the protection of your principal, that if the market drops 20, 30, 40%, which many of us believe it definitely could do at this point with as overvalued as the market is, you're not going to lose any of your assets. So not saying not to do it if you're in a position you just don't have any other money to get into a term policy, but would definitely recommend, or if you don't have the money to get into a permanent policy, definitely recommend that you look at permanent insurance if you can afford it, to get the benefits that those policies will offer and the growth you can get inside of that product.
Dave, we typically work with people. I mean, it could range all over, but usually 50 plus. So we're talking about kind of the young right now, trying to figure out the investment there. What other advice do you have for those that have kids that are looking at this by saying, hey, I really need something solid for my kids right now? I mean, is there any specific advice? I know it's really hard to be generic, but we can look at this and say, what can we do to help guide them a little bit?
Yeah, the biggest thing is they need to make sure they're saving. I mean, when we look at the future of retirement, the fact we're living longer, the cost of healthcare going into retirement, we want to make sure people are setting money aside for themselves. Number two, what I would recommend is really don't overlook those Roth IRAs or 401ks. Many people think, oh, I can just go ahead and put the money into the tax deferred bucket. Well, again, the younger you are, the bigger problem you're going to have, because taxes have to go up to solve the issue. We've got Social Security that's having major issues. Medicare is having major issues. We've got national debt that's at $28.5 trillion. People expect to get up to about $60 trillion by 2030. Well, this is a major issue when we look at the future of taxes. So we want to get into those Roth accounts and then look at these life insurance retirement plans as a way to replace the bond portion of your portfolio. If you've got excess money, it can be a great way to build out a well-balanced portfolio that's got a lot of diversity that can allow you to maximize the benefits you'll get 20, 30, and 40 years from now. Because what we realize too, time value of money, the sooner you can invest, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And Dave, I want to continue on this, but I'm going to jump over. I've got a few questions coming in. So we'll jump over to Fred here. Fred, welcome. We're glad to see you here as well again. It's always great to have a good, solid group with us. Fred is asking, hi, Dave and CR. When planning on doing Roth conversions, do you suggest doing it all close to the end of the year so that you can better estimate where you will be from a tax perspective, or do the conversion over the year, the amount to each month, for example?
Yeah, because you can do it at the end of the year, Fred. My recommendation for most people in most situations would be to wait until that point to make those conversions, so you have a better understanding. Because depending on bracket you're in, how much you need to convert, there is a mathematically correct amount that we want to convert over, especially now where we've got a market that I believe substantially overinflated. Depending on what you're going to do with that money once it gets into the Roth, may want to wait to see what the market does. If the market ends up dropping 20 or 30%, obviously now you've got less money you've got to convert and pay taxes on. Now, if we're in an environment where we expected the market to go up substantially, hey, let's get the money into there as soon as we can so we can take advantage of the upswing in the market. But for most people, I don't see that. Now, if you're going to put money into principal protected products where we do have the opportunity of going up without going backwards, maybe we would recommend you do something during the year. But yeah, for most of you, Fred, I would just say, hey, set there, hold on before you get to that point, let the year play out, and then and the investment structure we currently have, whatever's going on now that we call the stock market, let that all play out and then make those conversions somewhere in November, December.
Yeah, great advice, especially right now we're waiting, right? There's so much happening right now in the world. We've talked about this many times before our shows, but we're kind of in that area right now where we don't really know what's happening.
Yeah, and the one thing I will tell you too, though, is don't completely try to play the market. Now, some people are going to say, well, hey, I'm going to wait to do conversions over until the market drops. Well, if we try to play the market, what we find is one of the worst things we can do for our retirement. Yeah, it may drop. We may have situations to where we go backwards. But all in all, as we look at a 30 or 40-year retirement, if we'll just follow sound financial principles, make the adjustments when we should and can, things seem to work out over the long term.
Yeah, great advice. Dave, I love this question from Gary, and I want to find out the answer for this one too. When will you give a presentation on the Mega Backdoor Roth IRA?
The goal is, Gary, is to do something Roth IRA for the end of the year. We've got some information put together. The challenge I'm having is getting time to do it. I felt like with this year where I'm not teaching quite as many classes, that I'd have some more freedom, but it's getting filled up with other projects. We're talking with a lot more people this year from a planning standpoint, but I'm hoping by the end of the year, we've got a new class coming up with Tom Hegna. Don't Worry, Retire Happy. That's going to be a class we have coming out, I think, in a month from now. And then I think we're going to do one more with him on life insurance policies. And then hopefully our next one would be on Roth conversions, Roth backdoor IRA conversions, as well as the Mega Backdoor Roth. So you're going to have to wait a while, but hopefully by the end of 2021, we can get this slotted into the system.
And Dave, talk about being busy. I mean, from all the different webinars, your podcast, your live shows, there's a lot more things happening behind the scenes people aren't aware of, even new webinars. But it's also great to see as you're teaming up with David McKnight and Tom Hegna and many others that you're going through this and you're really trying to get the best education for people around by gathering all of this information. And the thing I like about this is you're sharing it. You're giving this information out for people to consume. And so that takes a ton of your time also.
Yeah, it really does. It's amazing how busy we are, and I'm happy to be busy as we go through this process because we believe we're doing the right thing for people, and we're proving it with what we're doing. But it is amazing how hard it is sometimes to keep up from the research standpoint. You know, as we look at the various classes, we're just launching here, I think in the next 2 weeks, our revised Medicare class. It's an hour and a half deeper dive into the Medicare program. A couple of months ago, we launched our revised reverse mortgage class. We launched a long-term care class. We're working on an annual update class. We've got our Joe Biden class that's continuing to change because we continue to get new updates on what's happening. So it's just an ever-revolving door of improvement, but hopefully we can get the information people need as soon as we can possibly do it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Dave, let's jump over and get Jack on here. I really appreciate Jack's question. He's asking, the state of Washington has implemented a statewide long-term care tax. Do you know if the life insurance policies with a rider would qualify an employee to opt out of this program?
I do not know if they would allow you to do that. My guess is no. But who knows? Because they are chronic illness riders. They're designed to be able to help cover those costs if you've got a policy. But I don't know for sure. You're going to have to go to the state of Washington and try to get that detail there from a state level.
And Dave, the states are adding things like this, especially like a long-term care tax. How do you think this is going to affect us or maybe our retirement overall?
Well, the issue is, and why they're doing it, is they're realizing it's too costly. That their Medicaid programs are suffering greatly because of the overall cost of a long-term care event. So I would be shocked if we don't see more states try to step in and solve this. In fact, President Biden has proposed some incentives to get people to sign up for long-term care insurance. Problem is it's so expensive. That's why people aren't signing up. It's not they don't want it, not that they don't realize there could be a problem. They're saying, look, I either feed myself and have a home or I buy long-term care insurance. I really can only do one or the other. So by implementing taxes, it's a hidden way to solve problems. Fortunately, a lot of people, you have to pay those taxes, so they're going to get the money into the coffers to do that. But it's a major issue. We're going to see it from state sides. We're going to see it from federal government side because they're partnered with Medicaid. This is going to be something we'll see a lot of adjustments to over the next decade or so, especially with all the baby boomers that are going to be going into those long-term care facilities.
Yeah. And again, for those watching live, go ahead and submit your retirement question. Even if it's not on the topic today of the life insurance retirement plan, we've got another topic coming up. But if you have questions, like Dave even brought up Medicare, there's a lot of different areas we cover. And we want to be able to throw these questions out and be able to help you and get these questions answered.
So let's talk a little bit about that long-term care. And I think it goes back to Jack's question and what we're talking about, the concern with it. So baby boomers are 1946 to 1964. Well, if you take someone who was born in 1946, what are they right now? 74, 75 years old. They have not even hit what would be life expectancy from a long-term care perspective or someone who hit the retirement years. Average life expectancy is 84 for someone that's hit retirement for a male, 88 for a female. And long-term care, up until you get to life expectancy, really isn't a big issue for retirees. You only got a small percentage that are having a long-term care event. So we really do have a freight train that's coming once these people start hitting their mid-80s, because at that point, you've got a 70% chance if you live beyond your mid-80s, you'll have some type of long-term care event. So, the issues we have somewhere around 2030, 2035, same time Social Security's having major issues. We're going to see a real big drain on the Medicaid programs because of long-term care events and people not being able to pay for them.
And with this spike, Dave, what's that going to do to everything we're working on right now?
Well, it's going to make it harder for people to cover the costs. It's going to make it more important for you to have some type of insurance to help cover those costs, because the cost will go up. You're going to have a shortage of facilities. You're going to have a shortage of resources available to take care of those. So supply and demand. Those facilities are going to be able to charge a fortune for people going in there because they're going to have a long line of people. It's going to be like the release of the Apple iPhone. You're going to have people standing outside or sitting outside in their wheelchairs saying, hey, please let me in. I want to come in and I need to get taken care of, because it is a problem that we've got facing us. And it's something we're definitely going to have to look at as a society, and retirees have got to realize that the worst is yet to come on that side as well. Same thing we talk about Social Security and Medicare.
So Dave, what can we do today? Because I feel like that's the thing we always talk about is we know things are coming. You talk about the freight train, we know about tax increase, but what can we do today?
The biggest thing is we've got to start putting into place the products and the tools to allow us to get to the safe and secure retirement we want. It's like a long-term care event. We can go out and for those who are healthy, they can get a life insurance policy that can be used as a long-term care coverage benefit once they get to that point. And if you can't, hey, maybe you've got to go out and buy a long-term care policy, which there's great ones out there. They're going to be expensive, probably more than you want to pay, but they can be a great way to help solve your issues in the future. Because what we find, we do rely upon the government. I think the government's going to have programs still available, but it gets to a point that the government's not going to be able to provide all the same programs they do going forward that they are now, just because there's not going to be ability to do it.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Dave, let me jump over and let's get Gary's question in here. He said, would you recommend the use of accumulation trust as an antidote to the elimination of the stretch IRA because of the SECURE Act?
Gary, it's a great question, and I will tell you, know a lot about it. I mean, I understand the security, I understand the limitations now that if you end up passing away and you those IRAs to your kids or beneficiaries, only have 10 years distributed out. On the accumulation trust side, I apologize, but it's not something I'm super familiar with in regards to this solving the IRA issue. So if you want to shoot me an email, happy to do some research to help if I write any answers, but it's not something I have a ton of knowledge on.
Great. And Gary, thank you so much for the question. And again, Fred and everyone else, thank you so much for sending your questions in. I think this is so helpful. And not only are we getting more information out of this and educating us, but we're also helping those who are part of this, who are watching. And we really appreciate that. Dave, let me get to Patty's questions. Patty's asking, is a life insurance retirement plan good for people of all ages, including those near retirement?
Yeah, Patty, thank you very much for your question. It's not good for all ages. And we look at all ages from birth to age 10 or whatever the life expectancy is, people that are living the longest in our society at this point. Once you get over age 70, really not a great option because the cost of insurance gets so expensive. We can't meet the fee criteria that we want in life insurance retirement plan. But if you're just approaching retirement or you're early to mid 60s, an absolute great way to be able to get tax-free income, to be able to have principal protected income, to be able to provide for a long-term care event and have a death benefit. I mean, all these things can be consolidated in an environment where you can get a higher rate of return than you would get out of your bond portfolio. So it really can be a great option for those in their 60s. If you're young, again, it can be a great option for them as well. But once we get to an older age, we plan to take this off the table.
And Dave, with that one, Michael's question is a great follow-up to this one. And he's asking, so what are the best insurance carriers to consider for all of these policies?
There are a ton of insurance companies out there that we work with 50 different insurance companies ourselves. I will tell you, when you look at the policies and the requirements that the life insurance retirement plan has, and we'll quickly go through those. If you've been on the show, you've heard them many times. You're new to the show. What we want safe and productive growth. So we want that asset to outpace inflation and to be in a position where we can't lose the asset value at any time. We have low fees. We want them to be comparable in cost, including the cost of insurance, to your typical investments you would have in your 401k plan or inside of your IRA. We want tax-free and cost-free distributions. Tax-free, very easy to do by following the rules of the plan. Cost-free, unfortunately, this is one where most insurance companies fall apart. They end up charging you to take out your own money, and many times it can be as much as 4%. And if that's the case, really it's not going to benefit you to use these as a stream of income during your retirement years. And the last one is we want that no fee long-term care or chronic illness rider so that we can take the death benefit in advance. Well, what are some of the best companies? Depending on the state you live in, where you're at, that's going to make a difference. One of them that we use pretty extensively is Allianz. They're a great one. We do use Symetra Life once in a while, depending on which state you're in. We look at products such as, trying to think of some of the other names out there. Minnesota Life is another great one, but it really comes down to your situation, what we're trying to accomplish, and which carrier is going to offer you the best option when it comes time for you to apply.
Dave, Patty and Michael are probably bring up the most questions we've ever had about this, is because everyone wants to know the right age and the right carriers. And so they're really trying to say, Dave, what do I need to do? And I think that's a great question. It's okay, Dave, you're talking about all these products. We're in certain age groups. What do we do and how do we take care of this? Because I think that's really what Michael and Patty are actually trying to get to.
Yeah, you've got to be in a position where you can work with someone that has access to the tools you need. I mean, that's the first situation, and that's one of the great things that I believe that we offer to those we work with. We offer an extensive amount of knowledge and education. In fact, from my experience as a CPA for 25 plus years, I've never worked with any other outside financial advisor that provides the level of education that we do, from anywhere from Social Security to long-term care to Medicare to tax rates. I mean, whatever the case may be. But then we've also got to have access to the tools. One of the challenges I see with many advisors out there, especially if they're captive, they can only sell what the company they work for allows them to sell. And many times they don't have the best products. That's why we work with so many different companies, because depending on, again, what state you live in, what your health situation is, whether you're looking for a life insurance or an annuity, whether you want to put money into the stock market, we want to be able to have the freedom to be able to choose between companies to get you the best possible option for your situation.
And great advice. And with that, Dave, sorry, I was just reading Gary's question. He's asking also, as we're talking about these different topics today, he's talking about, well, what are the best insurance companies offering long-term care policies? He's looking at Lincoln, Nationwide, Pacific Life.
Yeah, all of those are going to offer top tier long-term care policies. The biggest thing you want to look at, and again, they all have different guidelines. The biggest thing I recommend, and talk about this in my presentation, is you've got to look at the potential future cost of what you're going to be paying for that policy. That's one of the things you've got to look at, because most of these, in fact, the other day, someone was getting sold a policy and they came back and said, yeah, the agent told me that they have to get approval from the state to be able to do this. Like it was going to be this hard, difficult thing. Well, let me tell you, for you getting approval for the state to do something in your house, yeah, it may be difficult, but for an insurance company to get approval to raise your long-term care premiums, that happens every year. So don't get bought in that they're not going to be able to raise those premiums if your insurance policy allows them to do that. So you want to look at what your premiums could become. You want to take it over a period of time. That's another one. I never recommend anybody pay these policies until you use them or you pass away. You should only be paying for 10 or 20 years. And then look at the daily benefit, see where that's at, and any inflation adjustment riders that they may have to allow you to keep up with the cost of inflation and what healthcare is going to do. If you can look at those terms, you go to these companies and find that policies that will fit the requirements that you need to allow you to get a product that you feel will help you during your retirement years. If you're to have a long-term care event, not a problem to do so. All the companies you've listed there, Gary, are very high-rated companies, so they'd be very secure from an insurance standpoint. But it's really what are you trying to accomplish in making sure that those policies have those requirements.
And Dave, you kind of gave us a list of things you're looking for when we talk about different products, especially when we get into the life insurance retirement plan. And how did you find out what you were looking for? What did it take for you to go through and say, okay, here's my list of the top 10 things we want, and why was that important to you?
Yeah, really, it takes education and making sure that you understand the issues that you've got to deal with and the things that could possibly happen. And that's one of the great things about working with advisors like ourselves who have been educated in the process, is we know these things that you need to look for. Because if not, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. One of the biggest things that I often see happen, and people come to us all the time with this situation, is they've been sold a product, they got excited about it, but it never got explained to them. They were never told how it was going to work and effectively really help them in the retirement. So there's a lot of frustration. Well, the goal is to make sure you understand how it works, the goods, the bads, the potential pitfalls that it could have. And it's really our job as advisors to make sure we walk you through each of those so you can cover it. And it's going to be different for all of you. Again, long-term care events going to have a different financial impact on you than it's going to have upon your neighbor that lives down the street.
I think that's great advice. And Dave, I really appreciate you taking time. We're really close on time here. We have a whole nother subject to get into, but instead of diving into that, I wanted to have people understand a little bit about what they can do to be part of this. And you explained a little bit how they can sign up to have a no fee consultation with you. and help them understand why that's important right now, especially where they are in retirement or where they're headed to, so that they can get on the right path.
Yeah, people need to start spending more time on the retirement structure itself. We talk about it all the time that more people are going to spend more time planning their next vacation than they will on retirement. Well, you've got to be willing to put the time in. You've got to be willing to make the investment, because nothing turns out that we don't commit time to. It's never going to turn out the way that we want it. If you want to make a beautiful cake, it's going to take you time to put that cake together. You're going to have to get the ingredients you want. And obviously, depending on the level of cake you want, you may have to get more expensive ingredients to go into there to reach the standard you're hoping for. But if you do that, you put in the time, you learn the process, it's going to turn out the way you want it to turn out. And same with retirement. We can't just throw a number at a wall and say, hey, if we have X dollars when we get to retirement, that's going to allow us to get through the retirement we're going to have. Not the case anymore. Too many risks, too much longevity going on, too much uncertainty in the government. We're going to take action to get all that stuff off the table.
Yeah. And I really hope you can spend some time on your retirement. Even right now, everyone's traveling all over the country right now because it's more open and we have that ability. And like you said, Dave, is we're spending more and more time traveling and trying to figure out what car we're going to get, where we're going to stay, what we're going to do. And I think if we can really hone that in to say, now we really need to focus on our retirement, that it is true. We are going to find better outcomes. We're going to be able to not be so afraid as the market shifts. So we're still going to be stable. And I think that's such wise advice, especially what we're dealing with right now in the world.
And don't just accept what's given to you. I mean, that's another thing that I would tell you, especially from the government standpoint. Many people look at Medicare, they look at Social Security and think, oh, you know what, the government offers me to take Social Security at 62, I'm going to take it. Or Medicare, I'm just going to immediately sign up for Medicare, and this is what I'm going to do without searching the program. You want to ask questions. You want to figure out the details. You want to make sure that you're making the right decision, because I'll tell you, especially on government programs, they're way more complex than you think they are. There are so many traps inside of those programs that can cost you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars if not done correctly. That is very important you put in the time and effort there, as well as in these other areas. So we talk about the risks facing your retirement all the time. And if you can't eliminate those, if you can't get those out of the picture, you've got a chance that even though you planned and prepared for 40, 50 years for a safe and secure retirement, that thing can get disrupted so quickly that you'll be at a point where it's like, man, I wish I'd taken care of this. But it's going to be too late. It's a lot like your situation with the fire you had, CR. Once the fire's there, it's too late. I saw a post from one of our joint friends. He's an insurance agent. He says, everybody's calling me to try to figure out what the insurance I have on my home. Well, it's great to understand where you're at, but it's too late to increase your premium or your values if there's a fire setting right outside ready to consume your home. So do your homework early, get yourself where you need to be. So if the fire comes, hey, you know what? I know I'm protected. I know everything's in place where it needs to be. Sure, I don't want the disruption in my life, but things are going to be good going forward because I did the right thing before it happened.
And education is key, Dave. And thank you so much for providing that for us today. Even Fred is saying, thanks, guys. Always great info and enjoyable presentation. We're very thankful for you, Fred, and Gary, and Chantil, and all those who joined us live. Thank you for being here and participating and educating yourself, because as you do this, you're going to be so much better prepared for retirement and the things that you need to take care of. And so, like Dave said, when it's at your door, you're not going to be panicking, trying to figure out how to make some adjustments or pivot at that point.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. And Dave, thank you again. We'll see you guys again next week. And we'll be here again always at 11 a.m. Central Time. So that way we can answer your retirement questions. And if you didn't get your question answered and you were watching on replay, come back and visit us next week, or go ahead and submit those questions at theprosperityguy.com, where we can get those added to our list and we can get that again next time. But if not, we'll see you guys on a future webinar. We've got podcasts, we've got other live shows, even catch us on LinkedIn, and we'll see you guys all again next week.